Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris Schaub and I provide listening notes for classic jazz albums. Tonight we have Miles Davis, Kinda Blue, 1959, Columbia Records. If you like and enjoy what I'm doing, please like, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell, and that way you won't miss a video. Links to the notes and how to purchase the vinyl and stream on your favorite streaming service are in the description of the video. I have the Kevin Gray Coherent Audio Remaster for Legacy Recordings for Columbia. It sounds great. I'm very happy with it. I've heard UHQR has a new version out. It's a little expensive for me, but it's supposed to be, people have said it's just the best version to get if you can't get an original on vinyl. And I have a link to where to purchase that from Amazon, as well as links to discussions about this album and modal jazz on Wikipedia. It's very helpful, so definitely check those out. So this is the best-selling jazz album of all time, I think, and it was recorded at Columbia Records 30th Street Studio in New York City. Even people who hate jazz love this record. If you have a friend you want to turn on to jazz, this is the record to start with. If you hate jazz, or you think you hate jazz, start here. It's a great crossover album. It's the gateway album, the gateway drug into jazz that everybody needs to take. It's a landmark album in that it really puts modal jazz on the map. Miles Davis was spending a lot of time with George Russell, who was a composer, a band leader, and written a book about modal concepts for soloing and composition. And he and Miles spent a bunch of time together. Miles started incorporating modal writing in his Milestones album. But this album really is Miles making a concerted effort to do modal jazz. And I'm going to break away to the piano here in a minute and try to demonstrate functional versus modal concepts with scales. The liner notes, again, are written by Bill Evans. One thing you miss by not getting a vinyl album is you have to dig a bit for the liner notes. Some of the streaming services have it available a little bit more easily than others. I think Cobb does a pretty good job with that. But the liner notes were written by Bill Evans, the piano player on the album, another genius in his own right. And he says he thinks the music on this album is like a form of like Japanese calligraphy painting. It's spontaneous. You can't fix it. Once you lay down the stroke, it's the way it is. And so he thinks that the music on this record is like doing calligraphy on parchment. Musicians who played on this band played to sketches. Miles came in with just sketches or short unfinished pieces, and they would put those together into tunes, and he gave the musicians a lot of freedom when working with these sketches to sort of spontaneously create within the framework of his sketch something new. So there's a lot of like on-the-spot composition that's always happening in jazz, but really happening here, especially on Bill Evans' part. Listen to how Coltrane and Adderly, the two saxophone players, really balance each other out well. Coltrane, takes it out a little bit more than Adderly does. Adderly's a little bit more of a traditional, smoother player. Coltrane definitely is more, pushing the next sort of the next sound, more of a modern sensibility, and they really balance each other well. And to listen for that, try to hear the higher saxophone is Adderly and the slightly lower tenor is Coltrane. And Jimmy Cobb on the drums, he's the perfect drummer for this. Davis wants to have a nice, smooth, flowing, very cool sounding, but very modal, and so the drummer's got to pick his spots. Jimmy Cobb swings like crazy. Doing a lot of nice comping, but it's not nearly as involved as, say, like what an Elvin Jones would do. Now, I'm sure Elvin could have just played this and done a great job too, but Miles picked Jimmy Cobb because he really has that laid-back grooving style that and knows where to sort of like stay out, be a song drummer, but also improvise. It's also jazz, So he's just the perfect drummer for this. Bill Evans, the piano player, I mentioned. Total genius, can play everything from bebop to traditional jazz to modal jazz, and in classical music he brings a lot of like Ravel and Beethoven and Fauré and things into his piano playing. So he really is a master of impressionism. He's got a chordal concept that doesn't favor roots So he sort of leaves the root out, has these sort of extended chord forms that are really sort of self-voice leading in a sense. And so it just creates an overall sound and overall texture. And again, he's the perfect person to play this because of all that background that he brings to it. And plus, he's already been exploring this modal stuff himself. And Miles can hear, from knowing who he is, he would be the guy who could also compositionally bring some things to the table and mix it up. Wynton Kelly on piano on Freddie the Freeloader. That's the one track Bill Evans doesn't play on. Paul Chambers plays double bass. And Jimmy Cobb on drums, I already said that. And Miles Davis on trumpet. So, going to break away, go to the piano here, and then we're going to talk about functional versus modal harmony before we get into the tracks. Welcome to the piano. We're going to now talk about functional harmony versus modal harmony, and we're going to use the key of C major to talk about functional harmony. Find the two middle black notes on your keyboard, and the C if you have one, and the C note is right below those two notes, middle C. So we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, 7 pitches, and then repeat C at the octave. Okay, so these are octaves. We also have solfege solos, like in Julie Andrews. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, we can use those names. We can also call them by numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pitches, okay? So the first pitch, if we build a chord off of it, the root of the C major scale, we have a chord. It's the tonic, C major. It's home bass. If we go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we build a chord off of that, that's the dominant, okay? And the dominant's function is to lead us back to home. So the major thing in functional harmony is dominant to tonic motion, from dominant back to tonic. And you can have the subdominant, the 4, will sometimes lead up to the dominant and take you back to the tonic. Sometimes the dominant resolves to the 6. So the 6 is the relative minor. Sounds like a minor, kind of sad. Can resolve to the 6 temporarily, and then sometimes it'll come back to the 4 or 5, and then go back to the 1. Okay, and sometimes in jazz we use a 2, 5, 1. Okay, so you have these different cadences, but the key thing is there's motion and it resolves back to home. Okay, that's functional harmony. Whereas modal harmony, the chords all have a similar weight to them. All right, you don't have this motion, this desire to get back to home base. Okay. You can have less chords, maybe not always less chords, but usually, and they're a little more open sounding usually, and they're really great for improvising over and for writing melodies because they provide a nice foundation, and as an improviser you're not so worried about playing all the changes or getting back to home or any of these kind of things because the chords are providing a nice base for you, and there's not so much about motion from dominant to tonic. And that's a big deal because if you're improvising on a functional tune and there's all kinds of chord changes like flying by, you got to make sure that what you're playing is in the chords that are flying by, or at least can pass, because if not, it'll sound wrong. Whereas in a modal tune, if for example, like in So What, which is on the record that we're doing today, it's the first track, So What is in D Dorian. Now, Dorian is a minor sounding modes. Modes can be minor or major. There are 7 modes, just like there are 7 notes, but the 7 modes are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Okay? So Dorian, D Dorian in this case, you might say, well, it's a minor sounding mode, so how is it different than just playing in D minor? Why isn't it D minor? Well, D minor is just like A is the relative minor of C, D is the relative minor of F major. So F major has a B flat in it in the scale, okay? So what that means is you would actually have to be hearing a B flat for it to be D minor, but So What has a B natural. So what? It's right in the melody, okay? So what? It's a feature. And that raised 6th degree, it's not a flat 6 like it would be in D minor, it's a raised 6th degree, and that's how you know it's Dorian, because that is a key pitch in the melody. It's featured in the chords, and also the chords sound like a modal composition. They're not really going anywhere, they're just providing an underlying texture, okay? The modal tune has less of a direction and more of just like a scene. It's like painting a scene, like an impressionist painter kind of a thing. It's more abstract. So I hope this is helpful, and now back to the tracks. So the first track we talked about on the piano, So What? It's by Miles Davis. It's 16 bars. Again, it's an AABA form. The two A bars are D Dorian, and then it modulates up to E flat Dorian, and then it comes back down again. It's got that brooding bass intro. It's got the So What chord, which contains a perfect fourth with the major third on top. Maybe he got that from Ahmad Jamal. It's hard to say. But it's a very modal tune within the construct of an older Tin Pan Alley song form, which is interesting. Next tune, Freeloader, it's written by Miles Davis. This was the one that has Wynton Kelly on piano, not Bill Evans. It's 12-bar blues. John Hendricks and Ashley Kahn claim that Fred Tolbert was a Philadelphia bartender who was the subject of this tune. There's a lot of different origin stories for who Freddie was, and so there's a link to the Wikipedia article where you can follow the rabbit hole down the rabbit hole and try to see which one you think is the most convincing. I think you might have chosen again Wynton Kelly because Wynton Kelly was a blues specialist. The next tune is Blue and Green. It's Miles Davis and Bill Evans. Bill Evans eventually got credit for it among jazz musicians. He definitely had a hand in writing it, I think. But Miles gets credit in the royalties, so I can't prove it, but I think everybody thinks that, and a lot of the scholars think that this had to be a Bill Evans tune. I think a lot of the tunes on this album, it's fair to say, would not exist without Bill Evans. Bill Evans' concept of self-voice leading chords and his overall sensibility, which I had mentioned up top, it really creates the atmosphere for this album, you know. So he deserves a lot more credit than he got. This tune, Blue and Green, it jumps around different modes: Dorian, mixed Lydian, and Lydian modes. Cannonball Adderly sits this one out. So listen for the different changing modes, because the modes, like I said, will have different qualities. So Dorian has a sort of minor quality to it, whereas mixed Lydian is a little more major, and Lydian is a little bit more of a major sound. So just sort of listen to see if you can hear that. The next track is All Blues. It's a modal blues by Davis. It's played a lot on gigs. It's almost called every time I play just because people really like playing it. It's a real relaxing tune and audiences seem to really catch on to it. It's got a great little melody to it. And the last cut is Flamenco Sketches, Miles Davis. It's in 6/8. It's a 12-bar blues ballad. It's modal. It's got Ionian, Dorian, Mixolydian modes in it. And it's just a beautiful piece. I think it's interesting he calls it Flamenco Sketches, which harkens back to the idea that a lot of this album were just sketches that Miles brought in, and he really let the improvisers stretch out on the tunes and sort of take it in directions. And Miles was the kind of guy who would go there if it was valid. Notice in Miles' trumpet playing as well in all these tracks, as opposed to some of his peers who are very much, trumpet playing is one of those things where it's like purity of tone, having a lot of control. They're sort of the hallmarks of great trumpet playing. But what Miles does is he wants it to be more conversational. Now, Miles can get up there and play as straight as anybody, and he's got a lot of control, a lot of technique. He can play a lot of fast stuff. Listen to his bebop recordings. But he starts really getting his style of sort of like speaking, falling off notes, letting notes kind of just die at the mouthpiece, very breathy. That whole style is truly something he pioneered and made his own. And you really hear it here effectively, giving the melodic lines like a very vocal quality to them. And it's a nice melodic counterpoint to the modal underpinning of the chords and the harmony. So I hope this was helpful. This is a great listen, and I hope you'll be back for another video.